Hey guys, welcome to the channel. Today I'm discussing 8 core principles for simple and sustainable fat loss. Now, why is that important? Well, first let me tell you who I am. If you're new to the channel, welcome, I'm glad you're here. My name's Eddie. I went through my own 125-pound weight loss journey over 2 decades ago. I've kept that weight off over the years, and now I work with people and help them do the same thing. I help them get strong, I help them lose fat. Today, I wanna talk about 8 different things that I tell my clients and that I try to tell everyone that are incredibly important, not only for fat loss today, but really to be able to keep that weight off. A lot of people don't have a problem losing weight per se. Really what it is when they lose the weight, they usually gain it back, right? They can't sustain those habits. And so that's why I think it's important to focus on these core principles that are not gonna only help you lose the weight in the beginning, but they're gonna help you keep that weight off and have a sustainable lifestyle for the long run, for the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years. That's what I like to talk about, and that's the message that I try to relay to everybody else. So let's jump right in. Topic number 1. You should start with your identity. You have to start with identity. By identifying yourself as someone who's overweight, uncomfortable in their own clothes, eats junk food, eats late at night, whatever it is, right? Everyone's in a different place in terms of when they start this journey. If you identify as that person, if you make fun of yourself, we all know that person that maybe is a little overweight and they make fun of themselves. They tell little small jokes here and there about how fat they are, or that they love eating this or they love eating that, and they kind of almost make fun of themselves. That's not gonna help you get to your goal. So when I say start with identity, what I mean is changing your identity. You have to realize that you have to change your identity in order to become this new person that you're gonna become. Because it has to start up here in your mind, and it has to start in who you believe that you are. If you can't believe that you can be someone who's gonna lose weight and be healthy and be fit, then you'll never become that person. And so if we start with identity, then all of a sudden we're creating this new identity and we can relate to this new person that we're becoming. So what does that mean? What does it look like to start with identity? Well, what I tell people is, what do healthy people do? What do fit people do? Healthy and fit people do healthy and fit things. It really isn't that complicated. And so when you think about changing your identity, what you wanna do is you wanna focus on, okay, on a Saturday morning, what do I typically do? Well, if I'm overweight, I typically, go grab some coffee, maybe put some sugar and milk in there, and then I go over to the couch and I watch some Netflix or I watch some YouTube or whatever it is that I like to do on a Saturday morning. What does a healthy and fit person do? Well, a number of different things, right? Different options. But just for an example, what I like to do is I like to get up, I like to have my coffee. Maybe I'll put a little sugar in it or maybe a little milk. Not a big deal, right? If you enjoy those kind of things, you can keep doing that. But I already have in my mind of, how am I gonna get some activity today? Am I gonna go to the park for a walk? Am I gonna, jump in the pool and do some laps? Am I gonna take my dog for a walk? Am I gonna have a workout? Do I have a scheduled workout that I'm gonna get in? So all of these things are things that I'm already thinking about, because healthy and fit people do healthy and fit things. And so it's as simple as thinking about that person that you wanna look like or that you wanna become. And it doesn't mean an external person, right? We don't wanna feel like we need to become someone else, but the version of yourself that you wanna become, you have to try to identify, you have to bridge the gap between who you are today and who you want to become. Think about that person that you want to become. Think about what kind of activities and what kind of behaviors and what kind of habits that person does. And the simplest way to do that is to start with a Saturday morning or a Wednesday morning, right? What is that person going to do on a typical Wednesday morning? Do they have a planned workout? What do they do after work? Do they sit there and watch Netflix, or do they go for a workout, or do they go for a walk? What do they do after dinner? What do they eat for dinner? What do they eat for lunch? When everyone else is ordering out takeout and everyone's having pizza, do you maybe have a little bit of pizza, or do you have a lot of pizza? Do you have your own lunch that you brought into the office? Are you making your own lunch? These are all different little things and little decisions that over the long run, they compound on each other, just like interest does when you're looking at finances and you're looking at money compounding over a long period of time. And so as you think about shifting from your current identity to this new person that you're gonna become, you have to be able to think about what does that look like specifically? If I woke up tomorrow and I became this new person, What does that look like? Now, I will caution you against going too far and saying, I'm going to go from who I am today to this new person, and this new person does everything perfect. Let me let you in on a little secret. That person does not do everything perfect. The reason why they've been able to do that for such a long time and for a sustainable period of time is because they don't focus on perfection. That's something that we're going to talk about in one of the other core principles that we'll get into later. But that doesn't mean you have to be perfect. It just means that you have to make more good choices than bad choices. So if you start with identity and you think about who that person is that you want to become, then simply ask yourself. We all know, or if we don't know for some reason, we can go and Google, what do healthy and fit people do? And I'm sure you'll get a lot of really good ideas about where you can start. Start small so that you can continue, build some consistency and stick with it. That leads us to our second core principle. Adherence and consistency. There's two parts to this. Let's start with what I mean by adherence. Adherence means finding the right plan, right? So it could mean that you do a specific diet if you want. Now, I don't like to advocate for, keto diets or carnivore diets, restrictive diets, fad diets, quick fixes. I don't like to have my clients do any of that stuff because what happens is they'll do it for a month or for 2 months and then they'll fall off and they won't be able to continue to do it over the long run. And so if you can't do something for your life, then why are you going to do it in the beginning? And unless you have a specific event coming up, I understand in that sense and in that context. But if you don't have something that you're focused on specifically and you're focused on lifestyle change and long-term change, and what we're talking about here is really sustainable fat loss, then you want to find something that you can sustain for your life for a long period of time. And so what that means is finding something that you can adhere to, that you can stick to, okay? That's going to be different for everyone. And so don't believe anyone who tells you there's a perfect diet. Don't believe anyone who tells you this is going to work and this is the only thing that worked because it worked for me. What worked for me may not work for you. I eat a very flexible and balanced diet. I have a little bit of all the types of foods that I like. I make room for them by tracking and making sure that I'm aware of the quantity and the quality of food that I'm having. That works for me. I'm able to adhere to that. You find the options that work for you, and as long as you can adhere to that, then you're set, right? You found something that you can stick with. Now, adherence and then consistency. Consistency is the second part of this. So consistency is the most important thing that we can do. Over the long run, if you can't be consistent with something, you can have the best workout in the world. If you're not consistent with it, it's not going to work. You can have the worst workout in the world. If you're consistent with it, guess what? You're going to see some results, and it's kind of surprising, but it's the truth. Same goes with your nutrition, and same goes with your fat loss efforts. Find something that you can adhere to and find something that you can be consistent with over the long haul. If your goal is lifestyle change, if your goal is sustainable fat loss, if you don't want to go back to the yo-yo dieting and everything that you've probably been through in the past, or you know someone who's been through that in the past, in order to avoid that, you got to get it ahead of it. You got to get it from the front end and say, you know what? I'm not going to stick to something that's not sustainable for the long term. And it is what it is, right? So if I can adhere to it, if I can stick to it, and if I can be consistent with it, then it checks off those boxes, and then I'm well on my way. The third principle is that the goal is always to make progress, not to be perfect. We touched on this earlier, but I cannot stress enough the fact that please don't let perfection get in the way of making some progress. If you had something terrible for breakfast that doesn't make you happy and doesn't stick with whatever plan you're following, it doesn't mean that you have to throw away the rest of the day. Have a healthy lunch, have a healthy dinner, go for a walk, go for a workout, do something that's going to get you back on track, right? So don't let the fact that you weren't perfect get in the way of you making progress. You're never going to be perfect. If you're expecting to be perfect, you're going to disappoint yourself. That's the number one way to disappoint yourself and let yourself down and fall into this cycle of, I'm not good enough, I always fail, I can't do this. It's because people have this expectation that they're going to be perfect with a diet or perfect with a workout routine. It's not going to happen. Let go of that. Give yourself permission to be normal, to be human, to be able to go to a birthday party and have a piece of cake that maybe wasn't part of your plan. That's okay. That's all right. We'll talk about food specifically in situations here in a second, but what I want you to do is I want you to make sure that every single decision that you're making, whether it's good or bad, just make sure that it doesn't have to be perfect. As long as you're making some progress, as long as you're moving in the right direction, even if it's a little slower than you'd like, you're still moving in the right direction and you're still making improvements that maybe you weren't making in the past. So having awareness around that and treating yourself with some kindness, being kind to yourself, and making sure that every single day you're making a little bit of progress. You're gonna end up in the right place if you're making a little bit of progress. If the expectation is to be perfect, you're gonna let yourself down and you're gonna quit before you even get started. One of the best ways to keep making progress is actually our next core principle. Follow what I call the 2-day rule. Now, I didn't come up with the 2-day rule. This is something that a lot of other people have spoken about. And what it means is don't have 2 bad days in a row. Now, when you're first starting off, maybe you do have a bad day here and there. What can you do to get back on track? Don't make 2 days in a row of bad decisions, right? So don't have 2 bad days in a row. If you have a bad day, follow it up with a good day. If you're in a week and you have 7 days, at least you're not having 2 bad days in a row. That's progress compared to when you first started. Now, if you want to take it a step further, and it's a little tougher, but don't have 2 bad meals in a row. Within a day or within a week or so, don't have 2 quote unquote bad meals that don't fit into your plan in a row. And so by making these subtle shifts and by allowing yourself to have something that maybe doesn't fit into your plan, but then following it up with a good decision, then that gives you a lot of balance and that gives you the room to kind of make these different decisions that maybe aren't perfectly in line with your plan, but you're still making progress because you're following it up with a better decision. And so by following that 2-day rule, you're gonna end up in a better place in the long run. And so remember, we're not focused on the short term. We're not focused on what we can do in a week or 2 or a month. We're focused on what we can accomplish in 6 months, 8 months, 12 months, 5 years, 10 years. People don't gain weight all at once. People gain weight little by little based on the small decisions that they make every single day, compounded on each other. So you want to do the same thing in the opposite direction. You want to do the same thing in terms of tracking toward that new identity that we talked about in the beginning. And so how do you do that? Make a bad choice with food. That's okay. Be kind to yourself. You're not trying to be perfect. Remember, from the other core principle, these all tie in together. You're not trying to be perfect. You're trying to make progress. And a really good way to make progress is to follow that 2-day rule and make sure that if you do make a choice that's not in line with your goals, follow it up with a really good choice that you're going to be proud of. This leads us to our 5th core principle. I love this one because this is probably a little different than when you hear in the industry, but when you think about food, food is not inherently good or bad. It just really depends on the situation that you're in, whether that food is a good choice or a bad choice. Let me give you an example. I always tell my clients, if you get home from work on a Tuesday night and you eat a half a pound of cake or a half a pizza or, insert whatever bad food, that's not a great choice. We can agree that that's not a great choice. However, if you go to a birthday party or you're celebrating an anniversary or a birthday, whatever it is, you're going to your grandma's 90th birthday party and you have some cake, that's not a bad choice. That doesn't mean that cake is bad. Now, maybe it doesn't fit into your plan, but for that 90th birthday for your grandma or whatever occasion you're going to, you have a little bit of cake. As long as you don't have too much, that's fine and that's okay. And so what I want you to think about is no food is inherently good or bad. It's just a situation that you're in that makes the overall decision maybe a good one or maybe not so good one. So think about that as you make decisions every day and make sure that you look at it within the context of everything else going on so that you understand, okay, this is a special occasion. I'm gonna have a glass or 2 of wine and that's okay. I usually don't have that every day, but I'm gonna have it today and it's a special occasion and that's okay. Give yourself permission to do those things because again, we're not focused on what we can do in 1 or 2 weeks or a month. We're focused on what we can maintain over the long term and over really a lifetime, right? You're in this for a lifetime change and this new identity that we're after. Moving on to the next principle. So this one is one that has a little bit of controversy around it, but I'm a big advocate of having awareness around what we eat. And so the next core principle is whatever you track is going to improve. And you've heard that in other parts of your life, probably, whether it's if you're in sales and you're looking at, how many calls you're making, or you're in any kind of business situation and you're looking at metrics and you're tracking numbers. If you know that you put a magnifying glass on those numbers, they're going to get better, they're going to improve, because you're bringing awareness to whatever that is. And so the same happens with your nutrition and your fitness. If you track when you're working out, if you track some of your nutrition, it doesn't have to be, weighing food and every single ounce and gram, but if you have more awareness, tracking is just a vehicle for awareness. And if you can establish more awareness around how much you're eating, the types of foods that you're eating, as well as how much you're moving, the types of movements that you're doing and the exercise, if you can establish some more awareness around that, and you're tracking that stuff in whatever way makes sense for you, then you will improve on those things, right? A lot of people come across fat loss plateaus and they don't know how to get past those fat loss plateaus. The real secret is that fat loss plateaus aren't really all that common. It's just usually that people they lose the awareness of food. They lose the awareness of how much food they're having. People are notoriously bad at tracking food. They've done studies to show that, the average person, when they track food in these studies, they were off by 50%. So that means if I'm trying to hit 2,000 calories, I might have eaten 3,000 calories when I thought I tracked 2,000 calories. Like, that's how much of a big difference you can be off when they did these studies, and they showed how terrible people are at tracking. So you get better with time. I'm really good at tracking because I've been doing it for a long time and I eat a lot of the same food, so I know how to track those foods. But whatever you track is going to improve. And so I would recommend, even if it's just for a few weeks in the beginning, try to track what you're eating, try to track and have awareness around how you're moving, the types of workouts that you're doing. On the fitness side, I would argue that it's even more important, because in order to progress and in order to lift heavier weights, you kind of have to track the weights that you're doing. You have to see if you start off with 25-pound dumbbells and you're going to go to 30 and you're going to go to 35, like, you need to figure out when is the right time to kind of progressively overload and get into those heavier weights. And so tracking is going to allow you to do that. If you show up to the gym blind every day and you're not sure what you did last time and you don't know how many repetitions you did last time, then you may be making progress, but you may not know it because you're not looking at the actual numbers. When you look at the actual numbers, if you did an extra rep or two, guess what? That's progress. That means you're getting stronger. You lose that awareness of progress if you don't track. Same goes with nutrition. You lose the awareness of progress if you don't track. Our next core principle is celebrate the small wins. No matter how small, you have to celebrate the small wins. Celebrate the big ones too, but that's more of an obvious one, right? Celebrate the small wins. If you went through a whole day and you tracked all your food, or let's say you stuck with your plan that you like, that you can stick with, that you've chosen for yourself, and you went through a whole day or a whole week, whatever it is, however big or small the goal is, you hit that goal, celebrate that win. Make sure that you pat yourself on the back, because it's not easy, right? A lot of people struggle with weight, struggle with fat loss over their entire lives. And so what does that tell you? That means it's not easy. I can get into a whole nother, topic of how hard it is, specifically here in the US where I live, to be able to find healthy food and to be able to find things without a bunch of additional ingredients and oils and sugar and other stuff that's in the food, right? The US makes it really hard to find healthy quality food. So that's just a practice in itself, and that's something you have to get good at over time. But really, make sure that you're celebrating the small wins. If you had 1 or 2 slices of pizza instead of a whole pizza when you regularly would have a whole pizza, that's a big win, I would say. If you went and you worked out and you got your workout done, that's a win. If you went and you did not want to work out, and maybe you did half the workout, but you really didn't want to work out, guess what? That might be a win, because in the past, you wouldn't have shown up at all. And at least now with the awareness, you showed up and at least you got something done. So that's a win as well. So give yourself some credit and celebrate those small wins along the way. That positive reinforcement is going to help keep you, disciplined and motivated to continue to move toward that new identity that we talked about in the beginning. All right, guys, the last core principle for fat loss, and more importantly, sustainable and simple fat loss, really. The last core principle that we're going to talk about is be process oriented as opposed to results oriented. I want you to fall in love with the process of getting to your results. Don't think about the results. The results are going to come if you do the right things every day, day in and day out. And so what does it mean to fall in love with the process? It means falling in love with the fact that you get to work out. You don't have, hopefully, right? Most people don't have a reason why they can't work out. Now, if you have specific injuries or you have specific conditions, then obviously you have your own circumstances and you can figure out what you can and can't do. But for the most part, if you can work out and you can get movement in, celebrate the fact that you can do that, that you have the ability to do that. You may not always have that ability to work out, to strength train, to go for a run, to train for a half marathon, whatever it is that you want to do. There are people who can't do that. You can, so take advantage of it and go out and get it. And so when you fall in love with that process, when you appreciate that, when you express gratitude for the fact that you can make these good choices and make these good decisions, you almost kind of reinforce yourself to continue to make those good decisions. So if you fall in love with the process and the feeling of feeling healthy and being in that new identity, you know, when we're switching identities and we're going from who we are today to who we want to become tomorrow, there are times when we're that new identity and we're doing everything right. And then there's other times where we fall back into old habits and we become, you know, maybe where we started off or somewhere in the middle. That's okay, right? Make sure that you understand and that you appreciate how it feels when you're in that new identity, when you're doing those things that healthy and fit people do. When you're acting and behaving as the person that you want to become, make sure that you celebrate that. Make sure that you understand that that's a time to be proud of yourself, to feel good, to fall in love with how that feels, right? And the more you fall in love with how that feels and the more you're process oriented, you're not waking up and thinking, I want to weigh X amount of weight. What you're waking up and thinking about is, I get to work out today. I get to eat healthy quality food today. And that should be enough for you to be excited. And if you do those things consistently and you stick with it, then over time, the results are going to come. That is guaranteed. I can guarantee you that the results will come if you fall in love with just following the process, doing the things that healthy and fit people do. If you really, really make it an enjoyable process as opposed to, you know, something that you're dreading and something that you're hating, then you'll fall in line and the results will come naturally. And that goes to the importance that we talked about before about finding something that you really enjoy and that's sustainable, because you also don't want to, if you hate running, why are you going to go out and run every day? Walk, go for a walk, do some treadmill, hop on a bike, do a Peloton class, whatever it is, hop on a rower, like go for a bike ride. Do things and find things that you enjoy so that you can do them for the long term. So go for a hike, right? Like a lot of people go out, you know, like to get outdoors and go for a hike. Like do whatever it is that makes you happy so that you can continue to do it for the rest of your life. And then that allows you to kind of fall in love with that process and to be more process oriented, where when you wake up, it's not about the result that you're after. It's about, I get to go for a hike today. I get to go swimming today. Or I get to go and lift some heavy weight and throw some weight around today, right? I get to do those things and that feels cool. And I love the way that makes me feel. And then by focusing on the process of it, you're going to fall in love with that process. You're going to enjoy that process. It's going to have a lot of other benefits aside from just physically. You're going to have a lot of emotional and mental improvements that you'll see that come with all of that stuff. And then guess what? By doing that and falling in love with that whole process and liking to do those things every day, the results are going to come naturally, I guarantee it. All right, guys, that does it for all the 8 core principles for simple and sustainable fat loss. You can incorporate all of these into your daily routines. And the most important thing to think about is that you're not doing this for a couple weeks. You're doing this for the long term. So find things that you can implement and that you can stick with and be consistent with for the long run. Make sure that you celebrate those wins along the way, and make sure that you give yourself room to make mistakes here and there and to just get right back on track, right? And fall in love with that process, and the results will naturally come over time. Again, if you liked the video, please share it with someone. Please leave a comment below. If there's anything that you'd like me to cover in the future, I'm going to be doing about one of these every week. And so, you know, feel free to leave a comment. Let me know what you'd like me to talk about next, and I'm happy to cover those topics as well. Until next time, thank you, and I'll see you on the next one.